Great to have your company for what is an emergency episode of NBL Marketplace, because the Perth Wildcats, the Red Army, as always, have made more noise than anyone when it comes to this free agency period, and they have been screaming out for a marquee signing. Well, we assemble at very, very short notice to tell you that their marquee has landed. I'm Jack Heverin. From Los Angeles, we have Derek Rucker and Olgun. Gentlemen, thanks to both of you for staying up very late LA time to make this episode happen. Olgun, talk us through the news.
Yeah, so Jack, it wasn't just that the Wildcats had a desire for a marquee player. They needed a marquee player, and they knew that in order to compete. And so Joe Luala Jr., the best marquee on the market, they engaged with him early. He said no. They kept prodding. And ultimately, they landed not just his signature, but a 2-year deal for Achul Jr. to join the Wildcats in a deal that I'm told will make him the highest paid local player in the NBL going into this season. So this is a substantial signing, not just in its value, but in the Wildcats' ability to compete going into this coming season. They have created an incredible front court, and JLA is now the best local on that team, and I think he changes their title prospects significantly.
Derek, we've only had a very short amount of time to take all this information in. So first reactions from you?
Well, obviously, it's a huge signing for Perth, but I'm astounded, Olgun, when you just said that correct me if I'm wrong, he is the number one paid player now in terms of being a marquee signing. He is number one. He has surpassed Xavier Cooks now, correct?
That is correct.
Wow. And this isn't a function of productivity or potential, all that stuff. This is clearly a market mandate. There is no doubt right now that JLA has captured lightning in a bottle. He had the Perth Wildcats right where he wanted them. He had all the leverage in this situation. And the Perth Wildcats, just like that, Olgun, are back in the equation. I mean, they looked really dire. Just a few days ago when we were in Las Vegas, we saw Danny Mills. We saw John Riley. We saw how they were scouring, looking for players. And, the conversations between us were a little bit, can they pull this off? Well, they've done it. And full credit to the NBL teams who seemingly always seem to pull themselves out of desperate situations. And this is a huge one, Olga. Now I guess all they need is a dynamic guard.
And Ruck, that's exactly what they're looking for. That's what JR and Danny Mills were in Vegas looking for, that point guard. The talks with Achul Jr. were happening behind the scenes. Those were ongoing, but all eyes were on the point guard in Vegas. And Ruck, on the idea of a player earning what his market dictates, there are a few players over the past couple of years that reset the market. One of them was Keanu Minda, who went from the Cairns Taipans to the Perth Wildcats after having an MVP level season under Adam Ford out there in Cairns, and he reset the market by earning a substantial amount. And so did Xavier Cooks. He earned a deal that was upwards of $1 million, and that was someone who, all right, here is a high-level local player, and this is what it's going to cost to keep a player like that out of Europe, out of Japan, out of trying to find that NBA two-way option or that NBA deal. You're going to have to pay these guys a lot of money, and Xavier Cooks was someone who reset the market, and Achul Jr. is the beneficiary of that.
But we're talking about a known commodity, though, here, Ruck, aren't we? We're not talking about an unknown or a guy that we haven't seen in Australia for a long time. Like, everyone watching this episode is going to be well aware of what Joe Luala Jr. at his absolute best can do.
And I really anticipate a big season from him because there is space for him to do stuff as an offensive player, which we know is what he is. Let's just get down to the skeleton. He is a dynamic offensive player. He can step out and shoot the three. He can post up. He can take you off the dribble. And conversely, when his offense is going, that's when you see the benefits of him on the defensive end. His last season, Olgun, his individual defensive rating was very good in that strong Melbourne United team that lost in the championship series to Tasmania. And I think a lot of people's opinions of JLA was incorrectly framed by his lack of productivity in that championship series. Let's not forget the quality of this guy. And as far as I'm concerned, this is a 9+ out of 10 acquisition for the Perth Wildcats. It totally elevates their prospects for NBL 26 like that.
And Rock, guys, the reason why JLA was so expensive was because of his productivity over the past 24, 12 to 24 months. He was with Manisa, which is a EuroLeague level team, and he played extremely well. There's a reason why his asking price was so high, is because these teams across the EuroLeague were really, really interested in JLA. And so it was his performance over the past 12 to 24 months that got him this deal. And he's real 7 foot. He is legit big. And he's someone who I think fits really perfectly next to Christian Doolittle in that front court. And I'm now curious what JLA looks like under a coach that's not Dean Vickerman, because I think Vickerman did a really good job of finding the balance between letting Jewel Jr. rock, letting him be himself, while also sort of taming him and allowing him to play in a system. Can John really do that? We'll have to wait and see. But I think the talent of JLA is undeniable, and I'm very curious to see what JR can extract from it.
So here is their depth chart, the Perth Wildcats, updated with the inclusion now of Joe Wildshaw Jr. Derek, that front court of JLA next to Christian Doolittle, next to Dylan Winlow, who we're seeing in year 2, it's pretty impressive.
It's damn impressive, Jack. And you look at Adelaide's front court. Wow. I mean, it's tough to see who has more talent. Christian Doolittle coming off of a second half of the season, which we now expect him to be an MVP contender. Dylan Windler, who showed what he's capable of when he's healthy. That guy is a really, really good basketball player. And the thing I like about him, Jack, is he plays winning basketball. Now you throw a supreme marquee player into the mix, and Perth had every right to think that their front line is as strong as anybody else's in the competition. The only thing is, how do they gel together? Can they get to the chemistry level, Olgun, of what I expect Sydney to be at?
Rock, let me say 2 things on that. The first one is, I think all of us know Joe Wildshaw Jr. as this emotional character because of the way he plays and how passionate he is. One thing that I'll note is that prior to committing to the Wildcats, JLA made a phone call to Dean Vickerman and to the Melbourne United brass, and he informed them of his decision. Now, he didn't have to do that. He was playing in Turkey. He was playing in Africa. He didn't have to call Melbourne. He was there 2 seasons ago. But he felt as though Vickerman deserved the respect to hear from him where he's going. And I know that spoke volumes to Vickerman of Jewel Jr. and his character. So that is something that he wanted to do. And I think that's something that's maybe misunderstood about Jewel Jr. Now, the other thing that we have to note in all this, and it's sort of underlying everything, is that Jewel Jr. is on a 2-year deal. Christian Doolittle's on a 3-year deal. Yep. Then the Windler's on a 2-year deal. Sunday Detch on a 3-year deal. They are building something that won't just be for this coming season, but that can potentially be sustained for the next few seasons. And that is something that I think going into this offseason, we saw the Wildcats had so many spots to fill. But that's going to change next offseason because they've got these guys locked in on multi-year deals. That is very impressive from Danny Mills and co. And I think the underlying part that is underappreciated about this signing.
And Derek, just on that, and I mentioned it off the top that the Red Army have made a lot of noise. We see the comments, and anytime we do a marketplace, we see the stuff on social media, and they have become a little agitated and pretty impatient with what Olgun has just laid out there and potentially what's to come, which we'll get to in a moment. I would hope, if I'm a Perth fan now, I should probably just be able to relax a little bit now, shouldn't I?
Somewhat. I mean, I think all of these signings and the fact that you have a marquee player coming in, does it minimize the pain of losing Bryce Cotton? That's ultimately what I think you're getting to, Jack. And right now, I don't think it does, but this certainly adds a high degree of hope for NBL 26 and beyond. Now, let's look at that final import slot with all of those terms of those contracts that you just perfectly laid out, Olgun. I think you go for a 1-year deal here because you need to have some flexibility going forward. I wouldn't want all my imports locked in for multi-year deals. And that actually may work into the Perth Wildcat hands, Olgun. This is more your department. I think it's easier to secure a top flight guard on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, I don't think any high level import point guard is signing anything more than a 1-year deal just to keep his options open for Europe and otherwise. And I don't think the Wildcats have a desire to sign anyone who's unproven in the NBL to a multi-year deal. We never see that. One name that I'm told the Wildcats reached out to and are strongly pursuing right now is Jameer Young. This is someone who, like we saw in Summer League with the Chicago Bulls, he was on a two-way then. He lost that two-way contract, so he's a free agent. He had a 40-piece in the Summer League, so he's someone, there are these, 6', 6'1", creative guards who the Wildcats are going after. Xavier Simpson was a name. My impression right now is that he is potentially going on to a different opportunity. So Jameer Young feels like the guy who they're chasing quite hard right now.
It's a lot of scoring power. If it is Jameer Young, you put him next to Joel Jr., Derek. You put him next to Christian Doolittle, who doesn't need anything drawn up for him. He's good enough to go and get his own buckets. And then Dylan Windler as this perimeter threat. My goodness.
Well, and this is no disrespect whatsoever to Bryce Cotton or John Riley in the way they play over a number of seasons, but you can see the shift now. They're trying to provide a more balanced offensive potential and that type of firepower. I think they're looking at on any given night, any player can beat the opposition, any player can star, or we can just have a nice balanced offensive production, be strong on the defensive end. But I think that is the way it looks like with the acquisition of JLA and then this point guard to come. It looks like they want a more balanced team, Olgun.
Yeah, and to Jack's point, this is we mentioned this on a marketplace a couple of weeks ago. This is what the Wildcats were searching for the entire time. Yes, they were sweating on a Marquee. They were very close on Yanni Wetzel. They missed out on that. JLA was the only one left. If it wasn't JLA, then they would have had to swung at one of the Jacks, and that guy, one of the Jacks, wouldn't have really fit what the Wildcats are trying to do on the court. They had no choice because they needed a Marquee. This was what they were building toward. They just made us sweat a little bit. But the starting lineup of those four, right, which is the two imports they currently have, JLA, an import point guard to come, and let's say it's Sunday Depth, right? Teams over the past few seasons have always had that plug-and-play defensive wing. It could be Sunday Depth. Maybe Ben Henchel isn't eligible for college and he decides to return home. That's very possible as well. But again, it's slowly coming together, but it is coming together for the Wildcats. And when you look at what Elijah Pepper is doing right now, can we see a rise from him? Does David Aquera take a leap? There are some questions that I think about the depth, and that the same as last year, it was a little bit young, right? The next star coming in is also super talented, but quite young. That's where the questions are. The questions are no longer in that starting lineup because slowly but surely they've finally put it together.
Also a reminder that rosters aren't built in a day. I think as much as we love seeing the signatures and it gives us plenty to talk about and the fans love it, but I mean, the season doesn't start until the middle of September.
Well, some teams went out, Jack, and got their business handled really quickly now. Some of them had a nice nucleus returning, so filling in the voids was a lot easier, but certainly Perth has been slow. Hands, are they allowed to sign players at the moment, Olgun? And Brisbane, they're still a little bit slow. They haven't finalized things, but there are still some teams. What are we, maybe 36 days away from the Blitz?
I put it like this, Jack, if I can. The Sydney Kings, they come together for camp tomorrow. At least all of their locals do. I don't believe Kendrick Davis or Tim Suarez will, but all of their locals come together for camp, and the Cairns Taipans have 5 players signed. Now, what I'll also say is that the Taipans always put a really good roster on the floor come day one. So we will see what happens there. We have to be patient, but that's just where teams are right now. That's the context.
Just quickly, Olgun, before we leave the Perth Wildcats, you did mention his name, and if we don't talk about him, it would be remiss of us not to. Do we have any update at all on Ben Henchel? Because Wildcats fans are sweating on him, and to be fair, I think there might be a couple of other teams that are watching this one as well.
There are definitely plenty of other teams who are looking at Ben Henchel's situation and thinking if we can go and sign him, and they're probably willing to pay a little bit more than the Wildcats. So keep that in mind. As of today, I'm told that he is still waiting to see if he's eligible to head to the NCAA. From my understanding is that he's eligible from an NIL standpoint. It is just there are other eligibility concerns that he's working through. His desire is to go to college, and there is a college there that he'd love to go to. He's just working through it with the NCAA. Hopefully he gets it done. If he does, then there is a ginormous pay packet there for him. But if he doesn't, there are NBL teams very much willing to swoop on Ben Henchel. But the clock is ticking. We're hitting the end of July soon, and these guys have to get visas and get over. And so if he doesn't get that done soon, there are questions on if it can get done.
Let's shift our attention to Tasmania before we finish. News that, again, has just come to hand before we started recording. Great news for Tasmania, Derek, and that is that Will Magnay has committed for this upcoming season. You guys are over there at the moment. You would have heard all of the hype and all of the buzz around Will Magnay. It's certainly made its way back to Australia. And Tasmania were keeping their options open, remembering that they still have an import spot free. But Will Magnay will be with the Jack Jumpers when the season starts on September 18th.
Well, I was surprised based on, the whispers and the conversations that were going around in Las Vegas around Will Magnay, and the fact that the Memphis Grizzlies were looking, or they stated that they were looking to sign two-way situations, two-way contracts, which would have meant if Magnay did a good job, he probably would have secured one of those spots. Now, Olgun, we saw him get off to us. He didn't play in the early games. He got himself going in the second week of the event, and I thought he was solid. But I just wonder sometimes when you don't play early, what impact that has on the evaluation process. It gives Memphis time to see other people. There are other situations happening where they may have had their eyes on. But we haven't heard much from Memphis' side. We've only heard Tasmania announcing that will be back, and that's great for the league. I'm not sure how Will feels about it. He's going to a great situation, so I'm torn over it. But this now, in my opinion, puts Tasmania in a situation, Jack. Now, I've been crazy with these top 4 predictions. They're a top 4 team now. They are a legitimate top 4 team. I've bumped them up now with Will Magnay returning.
So, Jack, here's what happened at Summer League. I would be in the concourse and I'd see Darren Smith, right? The decision maker for the Tasmania Jack Jumpers. He'd have a little black book. And I'd go up to him, I'd say, can you show, who's in the book? He said, there are a lot of names here. I was like, can you show me? He said, no. But they had names of basically insurance centers. In the case that Will Magnay got a deal with the Memphis Grizzlies or otherwise, they were ready to swoop. Now, they were in an awkward situation because they couldn't negotiate completely with these guys. They would negotiate 70% of the way. Those players would say, can you sign me? And they said, we have to wait and see. This is the best case scenario for the Tasmania Jack Jumpers. No matter who they got at the 5 spot import-wise, that guy is not replacing what Will Magnay brings in the FIBA game in the NBL. He's Superman defensively. No import in, I think, world basketball replaces what he brings. For Magnay, it was a win-win. He gets the 2-way deal. That's awesome. If he doesn't, there is a big contract that he can slot into on a team that he enjoys being a part of with teammates that he likes. So it was a win-win for him. Obviously, it would have been great to see him go to the NBA, and he was ever so close. But the Tasmania Jack Jumpers can breathe that sigh of relief. They don't have to go into Darren Smith's little black book anymore. They have their entire lineup set for NBL 26.
And Jack, can we just touch on the human side of it, Olgun, being in Las Vegas and watching the Brisbane Bullets brass go watch Tyrell Harrison, hoping the best for him, but hoping that he doesn't play well enough. Same with Will Magnay. You saw it just throughout the event, and it really is an interesting dynamic to be a part of. And Olgun, it's really hard to describe the emotions that we see these coaches and general managers display during the event. They want their player, but yet they almost have to be going behind the player's back in case that player excels. It is a really fascinating experience.
Rock, the players know that these teams are looking for that insurance, but I will say that the NBL teams and the NBL have to approach these situations with the humility that the goal of a lot of these players is to get to the NBA, which is a level above. And if that is an opportunity that is in front of these players, then these teams and the league should do their best to make sure that they can go to those situations as cleanly as possible. And everyone in the Australian basketball community should cheer on those things.
Well, I think the Tasmania Jack Jumpers fans will be very excited to see the return of Will Magnay for this season.